Welcome to Utah Lake Explore More, the official podcast of the Utah Lake Authority. I'm Sam.
And I'm Savannah.
And in this podcast, we explore one of Utah's most important natural resources, Utah Lake. Yes, we're a little biased, but we think that's true. We talk with recreation experts, community leaders, conservation professionals, and people who know the lake best. And today, you may have noticed, I have a different person here with me. This is Savannah.
Hi, guys.
Savannah's also on our staff. She's our conservation technician this summer. So she gets to work with Alex, who's our Utah Lake Restoration Coordinator, on the actual shoreline field work that we're doing out on the lake, amongst many other duties. So she's here today to help me with our topic, right?
I am, yeah. I'm excited to be here. Excited to be talking about what I've been kind of helping work on this summer. So
yeah, it's fun stuff.
good.
So tell us about invasive veg, as we say at the lake.
Yes. So, I mean, if you guys have been to the lake, you've noticed that there is tons of vegetation all over the shoreline. But something that people don't always notice is there's both invasive and native species at the lake. So I like to we have the three big invasive species at Utah Lake, and that is Phragmites, Russian olive, and Tamarisk. So these are kind of the species that just take over what used to be beautiful native wetlands. I wanted to kind of cover a little bit about what these look like, so when you guys are out on the lake, you can kind of spot them and notice them.
Sure.
So first off, we have Phragmites. This is kind of the big one that most people see around Utah Lake. It is very large, just stands when it's alive. It's green stands that can get really tall. They can get about 15 feet tall.
It's crazy how big they can get.
It is crazy. Kind of almost, whenever I see it, I kind of look at it a little bit like, I shouldn't do this, but like kind of like a cornfield is how it looks to me.
You want to go explore a little bit, huh?
Completely different plant, not even related at all, but they kind of look the same somewhat. But so these have a sort of feathery plumage kind of look to them. And when they're dead, they turn a tan color, and they're just big walls of tan all around the lake. So
a wall is a good description for it too. When it grows in thick, it's hard to get through.
Yeah, so it can cause actually quite a bit of issues to try and get anywhere on the lake. So not a fun one. But the second one is Russian olive. These ones are actually, I think they're kind of a pretty tree. They're an interesting
I think they're
color.
Called a decorative tree or ornamental tree.
I think they were introduced in the late 19th century as ornamental trees, actually.
Gotta love people wanting something different in their yard.
Sure.
The ramifications of it.
That's why it's important to never just bring something in, because you never know what could happen. And someone brought them in, and now they're all over the lake.
Sure.
But they're kind of a cool color. They're like a sage green, or like almost like a silvery green sheen to them. They're kind of interesting, but they also cause a lot of issues and are pretty difficult to try and get rid of, because they just choke out native vegetation. They take over. They form just not walls like Phragmites, but just trees all over.
They got gnarly thorns on them too.
And they are not a super fun one. But one thing that I found was kind of interesting about them is there's somewhat of a saying that when you tear one out, you invite 100 others to the funeral. So
I've heard similar things. Yeah, over
pretty
the years.
difficult one to try and remove, because if you try and remove it, they're just coming back full speed ahead. So a little tricky. But the third one is Tamarisk, and this one is another tree. It's again kind of a pretty tree-ish, but I don't like them as much personally. But they are kind of like a reddish brown color, and you can get these pinkish flowers on them, and they're very scaly leaves.
They are. It's funny you mentioned scaly, as I was just remembering a lot of locals I've met over the years actually call it salt cedar.
Yeah,
is like
that
a
is
nickname
another name for them.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny. But yeah, they're kind of an interesting tree too. They can be smaller, bigger, just a whole bunch of different sizes. But again, they just take over native vegetation and just move in and don't leave. So a little bit of a tricky tree to get rid of.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that kind of brings us to our next topic, and that is how we actually get rid of these invasive species. So, Sam, if you want to mention some of our kind of how we do this, just with our different partners and stuff.
Yeah, so the removal effort at the lake actually predates me even, which is saying something, working at the lake for 10 years, but I think it was in 2011 was the first year that invasive Phragmites removal started. And it's primarily a partnership between our three entities, which is the Utah Lake Authority, previously the Utah Lake Commission, Utah Division of Forestry, Fire and State Lands, and then Utah County. So our three groups work together as kind of the leads, and then we obviously involve other partners where needed. A lot of the work that we do, both removal and also reveg, that we'll talk about later, is funded through the Division of Wildlife Resources Watershed Restoration Initiative, or WRI program. So a lot of the funding comes from there, and we've gotten it from other grant sources in the past too, and then funding from our three agencies' budgets. But it's a long-standing partnership, and it's a good example of how different government entities can work together to accomplish more than they can by themselves, right? Forestry, Fire and State Lands is very invested in sovereign land management and making sure that the vegetation on the lake shore is cared for appropriately. Utah County actually has the responsibility delegated to them from the state to remove invasive and noxious weeds within their county. And so they're very invested in trying to see the vegetation at Utah Lake managed well. And at Utah Lake Authority, we really want to see people have a good experience, and we want the ecology to be in a good place. And so all three of our groups work together to make removal happen, and in most recent years to also start revegetation and doing pilot projects, seeing what we can bring in of native and desirable vegetation. So it really is a collaborative effort.
For sure. Yeah, it's definitely a ton of people involved to do all this work, which is kind of funny because if you're just at the lake, you don't notice how much partnership and everything goes into this. And
it's changed a ton. When you look at, we'll see if we can find some pictures and put them on here, but from Phragmites back in 2011 and the 20-teens when it started, you couldn't see the lake shore. And there's certain areas today that are wide open or have a very healthy and diverse ecology because of the last, 15 years of vegetation management at the lake.
Yeah, no, it's crazy how far we've come.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome. But that brings us into
removal. Yeah, how's it done?
How are we actually getting rid of these invaders, bringing in native plants, all that good stuff? So the thing about these three invasive species is they're not just a species that you can chop down and they're just gone. They take lots of work, they take years of effort and just repeated processes to get rid of them. So Phragmites is definitely a tricky one to get rid of. It's been a difficult one along the shoreline, but we have actually gotten down, removed about 70% of Phragmites on the lake, which is awesome, just over years and years of removal. But to do this, you have to spray the frag with a just aquatic formula of just an herbicide that helps to kill the plant. Phragmites takes it down to its root system, which is where it actually stores lots of nutrients and everything, so it can actually kill the plant. And then once it kind of dies in the fall or in the later fall, you go through and mow it down, crush it down, and just kind of leave it to decompose just in the natural environment. But you have to keep doing this for about 3 years of just keep cycling through because it will just come back and back.
Yeah, it's aggressive stuff.
It is, yes, a very aggressive plant that does not want to leave.
Yeah. I will say, though, I think I did hear from Forestry, Fire and State Lands that they actually estimate we might be approaching 80% reduction. Yeah, so they map every couple of years and try and update it, but it's exciting to see such progress, right? To see how much shoreline's coming back. Obviously, that's an average across the lake.
Of course.
I always chuckle when people are like, well, it's there every year. It's like, well, sure, there's some areas that are more difficult, right, that might take more intensive, but broadly speaking, across the whole lake, it's night and day difference. It's
comparatively,
amazing.
It's much better than it used to be, which is awesome. That means what we're doing is working.
Yes.
But yeah, so that's Phragmites. Russian olive and Tamarisk are a little bit different because they're a tree and not
harder, so
much of a stand. So they take definitely a lot more just physical work for whenever we send crews out to actually go remove these trees. So you cut down the tree and leave about an 18-inch stump, and then you actually paint the herbicide straight onto the stump instead of spraying, which is what you do for Phragmites. You paint it onto the stump, and that's how it takes it down into its roots and can eventually kill the tree from doing this. But trees are a lot bigger, so obviously when you cut down the tree, then you have to deal with hauling the trees away, and there's tons of different stuff that goes into this. So pretty crazy.
Fun tidbit for you on this. A few years back, Forestry, Fire and State Lands actually put together a standardized protocol. So basically step-by-step how to remove them appropriately. Because there's sometimes landowners who live next to the lake who either have them on their land right there or see them on the land. They can actually hire, it doesn't need to be a certified arborist, somebody who has the appropriate herbicide application licenses and stuff. but there is a standard process so that it doesn't have to be done. So like if somebody's in a rush and our program hasn't gotten to it yet, they can talk with Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, they can get a permit to do it, and they can hire somebody themselves and get it taken out. So it's great that Forestry, Fire, and State Lands has worked so hard on trying to standardize removal so that we know what has the greatest chance of success for eradicating them, so we don't have the 100 to the funeral coming
They're
back
not
comment,
just coming
right?
back and back.
Yeah, we don't want that happening.
Yeah, because there are some people who just think you can just chop it down.
Oh
and
yeah,
then
and I've seen it,
causes
unfortunately.
way more issues than it was originally. So definitely important to follow that protocol. And yeah, if you are interested in getting rid of them, you can always reach out
to
an
Forestry, Fire, and
arborist
State
or-
Lands for sure, or to us.
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear what you got for us on revegetating.
Yes.
Though that's something that's new only in the last. Some people don't realize that only started in 2022.
Yeah, very new.
If I remember correctly, maybe 2020. No, 2023. I think is when we started. It's only 3 years ago we started revegetating. So I'm curious. Let's get into it.
Yeah, so this is honestly my favorite topic of what we're touching on today, because this is what I've gotten to do in my time here this summer, is lots of different revegetation work with different crews and different organizations all throughout Utah County to do this.
Sure.
So the important thing about revegetation is you always obviously want to use native species. You don't want to be putting in something that can take over the environment, just like our 3 big invaders. So you always want to make sure you're choosing a plant that can survive in the water circumstances. So at the lake, that's usually wetland plants, because lake levels change. So sometimes you're going to be flooded and sometimes you're going to be more in a drought. So there's different wetland species. Some of them are more drought tolerant, so you can put them a little bit higher up on the shoreline. Or if they can survive in flooded areas, you can put it down deeper, and then sometimes it will flood and they'll be fine. Or if there's no water in the area, just saturated groundwater, then they can survive there too. So that is really the most important thing. Always choose native plants. And some of those plants that we use are rushes and sedges. Those are really, if you're looking on the shoreline and you're looking at just beautiful wetlands, is usually a lot of those 2 plants. And those are great for just stabilizing the ground, for keeping Phragmites and Tamarisk and Russian olive out from getting back in. And they're great habitat for wildlife. Lots of different birds and different insects and just all sorts of critters like to use it as a habitat, and also sometimes to find food in that area.
Sure,
so,
yeah.
Great plants to add. My favorite are pollinator plants, which are what you would think
They're
of.
the prettiest.
Yes, they're the prettiest. They are the ones that flower and have good habitat for like bees and butterflies and all those ones. So we have lots of different ones, but some of the ones that we planted this year were goldenrod, milkweed species. So milkweed, if you remember, that's what monarch butterflies.
Yes, yeah, it's critical for them for
critical
habitat.
for their life cycle. So it's a good one to be putting in. We've done a few different like sunflower species, like nettle sunflower. They're cute, pretty little yellow one.
Fun.
And germander, which is, I believe it's more of like a purple plant, is the pretty one. I like this one's.
Cool.
But so lots of different plants to put in, and then also just some grass species. Those ones aren't as pretty to the eye, but they're also critical just for creating this beautiful wetland.
Sure, want the diversity of different plants.
You always want a big diversity, lots of different plants to survive in different conditions, lots of different plants to just create the wetland habitat. So always need tons of different things. But to do these different re-veg efforts, we do kind of 3 different things, and those are either seedings, planting plugs, or using sod mats of established wetland kind of species. So seedings, they are the cheapest. They're usually the easiest, the least effort.
It's fast,
Yeah, very fast, but they have the lowest survival rate, just because it's seeds and you don't always know how many of them are
Same thing as a garden, right? In your backyard.
Exactly. So they're kind of fun though. These I've gotten to participate in. You get to take out a Marsh master, which if you don't know what that is, it is pretty much looks like almost a tank that just drives out on the marsh.
It is basically.
And yeah, just a crazy piece of equipment that you drive out, and it just broadcasts a big mixture of seeds and just
I will say the first time I rode on one, disappointing, just because I didn't realize how slow they have to go.
Yes.
Right? Like people look at you, you're like, oh, that'd
slow.
be cool. And they go like 5 to 8 miles an hour, right? Because of the work
really
they're
slow.
doing, which is critical. But I was standing on it and I was like, oh, this is like a crawl. Okay.
It's a slow ride.
But they do
when you're-
important work, for sure.
But yeah, when you're driving back and forth, it gets a little bit almost mind-numbing.
Yep.
Just loading seed into the Cedar, and it's not the most
we appreciate
fun,
all of the people who drive those
Yeah.
on the lake. That's a critical
for sure.
job.
It is definitely a long day of just driving real slow. But they're cool, so if you have time, look up a Marsh master. It's a pretty fun thing. But the second way is plant plugs, and these are just pretty much the most basic, just planting a little seedling of a plant. So either the little box plants, or sometimes they're more of a cylinder kind of shape.
Sure.
And you just use dibble bars is what we use. They help make holes in the ground, so kind of like this big bar that you just stab in the ground, wiggle it, and it creates a hole. And then you just pop a plant in and then move on. So this is a little bit more time consuming because you have to actually create the holes, plant them in.
Sure.
But they're a little bit more successful than just seedings because they're already established plants. And we get these plants from different organizations. My favorite one is we actually get plants from the prison. So
the Correctional Industries has a diverse offering. Plants is one of which we learned.
It's kind of a cool one. So inmates can actually help, what's the word? Just
plant and grow them, I guess.
Plant and
I don't know
grow.
if there's a better word. Nurture them. Nurture them to be ready for the lake.
They can just help nurture these little plants, and then we get to take them out and then build wetlands out of them. So kind of a cool contribution that they get to participate in.
Totally.
So I personally like plugs the best. It's a little
They're
bit more
fun.
hands-on.
It makes me think of like Johnny Appleseed or something, right? Like some like old American legend of you're taking part in restoring the shorelines. You put those in the ground.
Yeah, you get to visit, be like, I planted that one right there. So kind of a fun one. And our last one, these ones are really cool. They're wetland sod mats. So they're pretty much this big, it's like grass sod. Like you can plant grass. You can also plant wetlands. So you can just roll it out, and it has pre-established mixture of wetland species just all on this mat. And you roll it out, and it's you kind of stick it into the ground, and it's made of this mat that is actually biodegradable. Sometimes they actually use coconut to make them, so it can just...
Oh, I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, to make sort of the rope binding base of it, and it can just degrade over time just into the environment, so it's not hindering anything in it.
Sure,
but pretty cool. So these are the most highest survival rate because they're a little bit more mature plants, so they can just survive a little bit easier because they're a little bit more used to everything. Don't get quite as shocked as some of the other plants and seeds sometimes. So
cool.
They're a cool option. But some of the recent plantings that we've done, just wanted to touch on real quick. Mill Race, if you go out to that access point at the lake, that was a big broadcast seating. And you can go out, and it's just this big open area. Some of the vegetation that was in there previously has kind of come in, but if you go, you can kind of see little tiny
little
sprouts
shoots coming up.
So they're coming.
And am I seeing this correctly? It was over 1,000 pounds of seed?
It was.
That's a lot. That's crazy.
So definitely took a lot of time to just
get it all spread out there. Yeah.
Spread it out, but it was pretty cool. And then Swede Lane, this was North Fork helped us do this. They're an organization that can bring plants and also plant them for us. And this was about 50,000 plugs and 44 wetland sod mats that they put out all around Swede Lane. So if you go out there, there's tons of vegetation out there right now. And if you park and walk to the right, you can actually see there's some more mature wetlands that have actually been there for a while, and they're gorgeous. There's tons of flowers, tons of
That's awesome.
rushes and such. It's a really beautiful spot if you're looking for plants to see around the lake. And then our last one was actually at the state park. This one I got to have a hand in too. We are planting 12,000 pollinator little plant plugs over in the state park. So we had UCC crews, which is Utah Conservation Corps, come out, and they were here for about a week or two, and they were just planting all day, every day. But they got about 12,000 plants in the ground for us, and that is awesome. So you can kind of see those popping up. We usually plant them in a little grid system, so you can see little grids of plants popping up. And then we also do volunteer planting events.
Yes, we'll have some later this fall, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, we got quite a bit. I think there's almost like 4 or something, all in October, I think. So going to be a busy month, but that is a fun way to just get the public out or get different organizations who want to volunteer and help us just plant plants and just kind of bring back some of those natural habitats that we used to have here.
Speaking of planting plants, I know you reserved for last, our last topic is putting them in your own yard. This is one I've not learned a lot about, so I'm curious what you've got.
Yeah, so one thing that I like to kind of tell people about is when you're choosing plants to bring into your yard, you should always try, you don't always have to, but it is good to try and plant native plants. So you can try and just quick Google search, like, what are some native pollinator species in Utah or in Utah County specifically, and you can find different plants that you can bring into your yard that are still very beautiful. They're really pretty plants, but they require less water because they're used to this environment. They require less fertilizer because, again, they're used to the nutrients in the soil, and really just less maintenance overall. You don't have to be out there like pruning bushes all the time because they just grow.
Mowing it,
like or
certain
mowing
grass.
it.
Yeah.
So you can even, they have different initiatives that you can get rid of your lawn, and it's called xeriscaping.
Yeah.
And you can bring in a little bit more of like a gravel kind of vibe sometimes with just tons of native species. And then you don't have to pay to water your lawn quite as much. So tons of different initiatives that you can use to kind of bring those native plants into your home. And the other thing that I love about doing this is it creates a great yard for pollinator species. So that will bring bees to your yard, it'll bring butterflies to your yard, tons of different insects that you can, if you have like little kids or even like dogs who like to just watch insects going by or anything, it's a fun place to kind of bring that habitat to your yard. So awesome stuff.
That's awesome. Well, I'll recap here real quick, make sure everybody understands what all we covered today, right? So we started off talking about invasives, right? Kind of got our big three at the lake, Phragmites, Russian olive, and Tamarisk that we're working on. We got a lot of great partners helping with removal, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, Utah County, North Fork, you mentioned some of the contractors, UCC Crews, which is the Utah Conservation Corps, if I remember that acronym correctly. So it takes a village, right? But it takes removal, and it also takes re-veg, as you were talking about, right? That we've got to reintroduce natives and desirables to fill in those gaps we're removing. And last but not least, that we can be involved, right? As residents of the valley, that we can help at the lake, and we can also help by putting native species in our yards as well. Does that seem like a fair recap?
I think that is a great recap. Yeah.
Perfect. I would love to hear from you. Do you have like a call to action for people? Like we talked about planting at the lake. We talked about planting at the lake, at home. What would you tell people? Like if they're listening to this, one thing that you wish people would go do, what would it be? I
think it's actually something that I think not to do. And that is to not bring in plants that you find either sometimes in different states or different countries. Because some people find like a beautiful ornamental plant and they think that, oh, this would look great in my garden, in my house. But when you do that, you never know what can happen, and then you could be bringing a monstrosity into your yard. So just try not to plant random plant species in your yard without doing a little bit of research or a little bit of talking to people and figuring out what would be in the yard. So just please don't do that.
That's great. I appreciate that.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Utah Lake Explore More. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and even our Spotify account at Utah Lake, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We do post our podcast videos on there, so super fun. But until next time, get outside, explore more, and we will see you at the lake.